weird. Bink. Bink. All right, here we go. This is SoundNotion, the weekly podcast for new music and music news. I'm David McDonald.
I'm Nate Blyton.
I'm Sam Merciers.
I'm Ben Furman.
And joining us this morning, once again, is Mirne Shim, our good friend, San Francisco-based flutist and impresario. I'm going to go with impresario, and now recently record mogul. So, Mirne, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
So,
and Dave, we know that you meant to say impresaria.
Right, sure. Whatever. So, Mirne, we're really excited to talk to you this morning because you've got a really cool new album coming out in a couple of weeks called Pheromone, and we've heard a lot of your music before for flute and electronics, so maybe you could tell us a little bit about the Pheromone project, and I know it started on Kickstarter, but a little bit about the Pheromone project and what we're in for listening to it.
Okay, well, I don't want to bore everybody, but like the kernels of this project were implanted in my brain like in 2011. I think that was it. I did a call for scores for works for one flutist, and Eli Fieldsteel sent me this piece, which is track number 1 on Pheromone, called Aerophoneme, or no, Fractus 3 Aerophoneme, and I guess it was one of, like, he wrote it when he was in grad school, and it's just really. It was a really cool piece. It's for flute, and the software was written by a super collider, and yeah, it had a lot of like the typical like electroacoustic music kind of stuff, but he used them. Well, when I first looked at the score, I was like, what? Because there was just like pages and pages of like pure quarter tone like runs, and I was like, there's no way. But I was like, you know what, it sounds so cool, and it looks so hard, I should just do it. And it's one of those things, like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm doing it, so I decided I was going to do it. And so it was just sitting in the back of my mind for a little while, and then I was like, you know what, I should really, it's such a cool piece, I should record it. And then I was like, well, what else goes with it? Yeah, so then Jacob Obella, who's a pianist who I met at Bang on the Can, we were thinking about recording some stuff too, and so we commissioned Emma O'Halloran and Isaac Shankler to write us flute, piano, electronics pieces, and then and then I asked Doug and Doug Lawson and Greg Brown to write some more pieces, and yeah. And I was like, well, I should just make this to a CD. We did a Kickstarter for it, and that Kickstarter paid for the mechanical licenses and the commissioning, and some of the commissioning fees for the composers.
Nice. So there's several new pieces, like brand new pieces on here, and that can be a big risk when you're commissioning a new work specifically for a recording, right? Because a lot of times we're commissioning a new work and we give the premiere, or premiere happens if we're the composer, and maybe it doesn't work out so great, and maybe we decide, maybe that one doesn't go on the record. But I think it's kind of risky to, or maybe this is not something you thought of, but did you think about that risk at all when you were commissioning a brand new work for recording?
Absolutely. But one of the ways you can keep your commissioning fees really low is promising in the contract a commercial recording. So, I mean, I think a lot of people have asked me, like, how do you commission so many pieces? Well, I promise a lot, as much as I can, in return for the piece. And then, yeah. And, of course, yeah, I just have a lot of faith in the people, and I just crossed my fingers, and it all worked. I mean, gosh, it worked out. I mean, I'm so relieved.
Yeah, these pieces are really, really cool.
And they all kind of flow together and just
contrast and blend in really nice and interesting ways too.
I think so too.
I also think, interestingly, there's a lot of contrast between this and some of your other music that you've recorded for flute and electronics. How is this stuff different than your previous?
Well, I guess I haven't recorded that many like electronics things before. Just a few things. I mean, like you said, like I have no idea what kind of music I'm gonna end up with when I commission the composers. I mean, I sort of know obviously I know their aesthetic and what they how they usually write, but I guess the main difference is I think I would say Eli's is more like a traditional electroacoustic kind of piece, which I love. And I don't know. I just like Isaac's piece is like I just love how it's a little bit of everything. It sounds like so like traditional at times. I think he said it was like one of his most tonal works or something. But it's so cool.
Tonal music can be cool, believe it or not.
Yeah, exactly, right? And it's like 8 in the morning, so I'm like, okay.
I'm trying to keep that a secret from my students.
Hey.
Yeah.
Well, and then there's also Matthew Payne's piece at the end of the album, which is really cool.
Oh yeah, he totally wrote that piece without me even. He wrote this piece and he's like, "Hey, so I wrote this for you." This was like a couple years ago, or like early 2014, and he was like, "I wrote this for you," and so like the dedication says like for Marinette if she wants it or something, and I was like, "Are you kidding me? Of course I want it." And like it's for Texas Instruments TI-83 Plus graphing calculator, and I think that's the most interesting part.
Yeah.
And then and contrabass.
Well,
that is really interesting, but the combination, I think, of contrabass flute and TI-83 Plus graphing calculator, which I don't know if you guys had these in high school. I know we had a classroom set of TI-83 Pluses in my math classes in high school.
Yeah, we had to buy ours individually, but yes.
Well, I think it's interesting that if somebody wanted to perform this piece, that there are no shortage. Like I'm positive, not because of me, but because of Megan, my wife. We have one of those calculators somewhere in some junk drawer. Mm-hmm. As do many, many, many other people.
Right. It's not like trying to find a functional Game Boy.
Yeah.
Well.
Oh, really?
I think it's. I mean. Even though the hardware is readily available, I think this is like much a bigger challenge. Like, I don't know. I know Dave, you're the only one with the physical CD, but if you look in the liner notes, I think I wrote in there that like I never perform it with the actual calculator because the software because the calculator was definitely not meant to be used for any kind of music. At least the Game Boy was designed with music in mind.
Oh, okay.
So the calculator, it uses a particular software called the Houston Tracker, which this one dude wrote and supports. And I guess Matt had some issues with it when he had finished the piece, but before he could, record the output from the calculator, like as a backing track or just any backup whatsoever, it crashed. And so he had to like recreate it from his mind. And the flute part that he had written out already, and he had to reprogram it using hexadecimal values. Like there's no note, he had to like there's a chart of hexadecimal values and the frequencies, and like he'd had to like key that in like one note at a time. I think that's how I imagine him doing it. And so that's why the first version was like a whole step lower than what's been recorded because he just got the
That's insane.
Yeah. Yeah, and trackers in general are really, really time-consuming and difficult to program. So to have to do that all in hex on top of that, that's painful.
Yeah, well, Matt is very special and dedicated. But it sounds so cool because sounds like the calculator has this the piece has like a microtonal quality because of the calculator's processor doesn't care if what kind of tuning you're looking for. It's like this is how many cycles you get in my processor, and this is the number that's closest to that pitch or whatever.
Nice.
So,
this is my concept.
So then what is the difference for you between playing this piece for a graphing calculator as a pre-recorded track compared to the stuff you've done with Game Boy where you've got an actual Game Boy on stage with you?
Well, I mean, it's easier to do with the backing track. I don't have
so then why don't you do that with the Game Boy, I guess, would be the other side.
For some pieces I could, and that would be easier. But there's one movement that Matt wrote that has there's a section that's labeled Roboto, where the programmed Game Boy part does some robot version of Roboto, so there's some slight variation on this one section. But then again, I mean, as a performer, there's only so many times you can go see a flutist playing with a tiny here's my flute. I sort of need the freak factor kind of thing. So
Okay.
Game Boy.
Bass flute.
Yeah, sure.
Exactly.
One thing that strikes me about a lot of these things is kind of along the lines of some of the things you just mentioned, is that a lot of it is very specific to your performance situation. And it seems like there's a lot of piece-specific work that has to go into performing this rep that may not have to go into performing a lot of other kinds of reps, certainly that wouldn't have to go into an unaccompanied flute piece. And that, I think, requires you to work a little bit more directly with the composers, right?
Yeah, for sure. And let me just say, I am so grateful to everybody who wrote, live electronics pieces, which would be everybody except, not that Emma and Matt didn't do amazing jobs too, but on top of everything else, Isaac and Eli and Doug and Greg also had to do so much hand-holding and tech support. Because, every time, they'll send me a live project file, and some of the instruments or some of the effects won't be turned on or whatever, and Doug's is Doug's and Greg's are super complicated, and I open it up, I'm during the headlights, there's no way for me to fix it myself or troubleshoot it myself, and and Isaac's piece was Max.
And you're pretty competent with technology compared to a lot of other performers.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the problem is I know just enough to know that's sort of how something's broken, but I don't know enough
just enough to break stuff really bad.
Well, but I also know to back stuff up before I break it up. So there's
That's
that.
true.
Hey.
But it's been pretty crazy.
I think there's something to be said, and this is something I've talked with actually these guys about a lot, that I'm not a master programmer at all. I understand very, very little about programming, but I understand enough that I'm able to collaborate with people that program. So I understand enough about how programming works that when somebody who is a programmer works with me, they're not frustrated and wringing their hands and thinking that I'm stupid behind my back the whole time, right? And I would guess that you fall into that category, considering the amount of experience you've now accumulated in this field.
That would be the best case scenario.
Well, and on top of that, certain programming languages are going to be easier to debug than others. If I have a max cache in front of me, I can usually figure that out in seconds. But if I have super collider code, I'm just kind of crossing my fingers and hoping that the debug window shows the actual line that's blowing up.
Yeah. Well, so along those lines, trying to debug this stuff, one thing that strikes me looking at this list of composers is that it is a relatively diverse set of people. Like these people have relatively different backgrounds and they're from different parts of the country. What is it like? What is collaboration like for you when you're working with these people on some very specific and technical issues from far away, wherever they are, to wherever you are?
It's a lots of frantic emailing, and then frequently felt like, oh my gosh, this isn't working, and then like a minute later emailing back, sorry, user error, it's not a problem at all. That's usually how it goes. And well, I've just been really, really grateful that everybody has been so responsive. Like I would, email Isaac with an issue, and then like 30 minutes later, he'd be like, try this patch. And I'm like, that's so awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, lots of email. I mean, technology, yay! So
have you given any live performances of this program?
I've performed everything live except for Eli's piece. So that would be happening November 1st and 7th.
And how is that experience of putting all these live electronics things together in the live setting different from the recording?
It's a lot different. One of the challenges I'm dealing with right now is like going from piece to piece. I only have my one laptop, and one audio interface. And FYI for all you electroacoustic composer types out there, it might be really cool to have a really awesome setup for one piece that you have on like a festival or something. But when you have to go from one piece of software to another piece of software, back to another piece of software within like a program without breaks, it takes some planning. So that's been tricky. But yes, as far as recording versus performing, it's very different because for the live recording, the live audio processing pieces, I record the flute part first, and then I put it through the computer, and I'm listening to the flute part, and like I've got my soft step, and I'm like following the score and like stepping on it at the right times and things. And
you record everything separately.
Yes.
You're not even. Are you even listening to the electronic track while you're recording it, or are you just kind of hearing it in your mind?
I'm usually hearing it in my mind. The stuff that has backing tracks, I'm listening to that.
Okay.
Yeah, because there's no way. I mean.
Right. I mean, it's a very different experience for these, and maybe Ben, you can speak to this, having done a lot of this stuff as well. Recording a piece for instrument and electronics as opposed to performing a piece for instrument and electronics, it almost becomes a different project entirely.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah, if you have backing tracks, then you can set up a Pro Tools session really easily for the performer to follow along with. But if you're generating the electronic part from mic input, then it's much, much more difficult. And then, yeah, you typically would record the performer first and then splice everything together in post.
Yeah. I'm wondering, do any of these pieces sound significantly different in their live presentation than they sound on the album version that's being released?
Well, other than like if I mess up, for sure, there's that a lot.
It seems unlikely.
Yeah, right. I wish. Eli's piece is, it has a little bit of free improvisation kind of section, so that's going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
His piece is like he wrote that piece with a lot of attention to detail for ease of performing. So there's lots of sections where you can like vamp or take more extra time and stuff to sync back with electronics and things. So that like the flow, but I'll probably be taking like you know, a couple more measures of time in certain sections just to make sure that I'm with the software program.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, like, it's probably less, depending on where I play, there's, you know, reverb differences. But,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a big question for me. So just looking over the track titles, one of them really jumps out to me, and that is the huge blank canvas neck tattoo for alto flute and digital delay by Gregory Brown.
yeah.
I gotta ask what the deal is with the neck tattoo.
Okay, I think I guess the way he described it in his program notes is that, you know, he had lots of like starts and restarts on this piece, and I don't know. I guess he felt maybe a little like that's the title he came up with.
Well,
I mean,
certainly
I get the huge blank canvas thing. It's the neck tattoo that is a little weird. I like it. I mean, it's a very cool piece. I was just curious if you had any insight on the nature of the title.
Yeah,
like,
I was wondering if there was some pictures in the physical liner notes that weren't included with the digital version.
No, I could go grab it and read it for you, but I don't. Yeah, but I don't think it's. I love that title too. I was considering naming my album Neck Tattoo. But I don't know. Somebody who's not in the classical music world was like, "That's sort of a weird title for a classical CD. I would expect that from like Buck Cherry or some like new like metal-y band or something." And I'm like, well,
I mean,
And
it's like the story of what happened with Mark Mellett's tight sweater, and and like, yeah, that whole title and how his the CD cover ended up being like a picture of a person in a tight sweater after he hadn't chosen it and stuff like that.
oh no.
yeah,
Yeah, and like neck tattoo might get into similar land of yeah. And it's funny that you say too that piece had a bunch of restarts and revision where like a huge neck tattoo. I imagine that would be a difficult thing to restart.
well, there's laser surgery, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, to me, it's effective because it certainly draws up an image. Like, if you stereotype a classical music person and you say neck tattoo, they're going to think of the kind of person that might have a neck tattoo and maybe feel just a tinge uncomfortable even if they imagine interacting with a person, the kind of person who might have a neck tattoo.
Yeah, actually, that's what I was really drawn to it by. Like, okay, so not everybody can rock a neck tattoo, right? It's definitely it's not for everybody, and you've got to own it if you've got one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you know, like most people that have it, I don't know, they're not the kind of person that, you know, you take home to your 90-year-old grandma to meet, you know, with. Yeah, so. Yeah, you're right. So I mean, that was what I was attracted to, you know, to the name.
It's one of the tattoos that's always visible, no matter what you're wearing.
Right.
Which to me seems to be the difference.
Yeah. Which also seems to be in good contrast to the following track on the CD, Penciled Wings, and we've gotten to see a lovely video of the trees going overhead and stuff associated with that track, right?
Yeah. Thanks. Yes.
That's your own creation?
Yes, I stuck my camera out the car. We were driving in an area with like no phone lines or yeah, I guess it's mostly phone lines overhead. So I was like, wow, how rare is that? You know, these days, like you could go like out into nature and see beautifully, you know, wooded areas and lots of tree-lined streets, but like how often? Not around here anyway. Like the more rural of a place where you go to, there's, you know, usually telephone lines and stuff. And this area had none, so I was like, I should take a video of it.
So speaking of those videos, this is not a completely new thing for you. You've made music videos for some of your past recordings as well. So what do you see as the value for doing that? What makes you think this recording needs a video? And how do you decide what the content of that video should be for a piece of music that, I would assume that in most cases doesn't have any visual element to it from the composer?
Sometimes it's like an accident, and sometimes like this one, while I was videotaping, I was like, you know what? If I get like a long enough, like uninterrupted, like shot of this, I could use it for penciled wings, because like that would work. So that's what I was doing. And then for like Mercurial, I was like, okay, what does this piece sound like? Like space. So it's like, aha, NASA has lots of royalty-free videos and images and stuff. I can exploit that. And then for Sometimes the City is Silent, that one was more specific. It was written about New York City. Mm-hmm. And in the piece there are words that reference like the Williamsburg Bridge and stuff like that. So that was the most expensive video, because I had to actually buy video footage of various New York sites on iStock Photo and stuff. Mm. That video cost me about $500 and 10 straight hours of work.
Well, they're all very cool. I wonder what so with all that work and all that expense, what value do you see in making the videos other than making a cool thing?
Well, I think same with the pieces that I'm recording. Like, what's the value in it? Only 10 people are going to buy it. I'm making a cool thing, and I think that's really important, to just make cool things just to make cool things. And I have an interest in it. I can do it, so I should.
Do you talk to the composers about them as you're working on them, or do you just kind of, surprise, I made a thing?
I think it usually turns out, surprise, I made a thing. But of course, I already know the composers, and like I can sort of already guess like how they would react to a surprise. Here's the thing. I mean, if there was a composer I didn't really know very well, I wouldn't do it.
Okay. You certainly know the pieces through and through as well at that point, I imagine.
Yeah, by that point, I hope.
Yeah.
So I want to talk, actually, speaking of music videos, I want to talk about this record label that you're releasing this record under, which, by the way, has a totally badass name of Aerocade Music. Could you tell us a little bit about Aerocade?
Okay, well, as with everything else, I'm sort of crazy, and I just say, okay, all right, I guess I'm doing this, and I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm doing it. And that's just sort of been how I've been doing everything the last 5 years or so. So with this third album, I was like, okay, I better like get serious and actually shop it around to some real record labels or something. Not for me, because, I mean, who cares about me? But like I feel sort of bad for the composers. Like they've put in so much work, and their pieces are all so great. And I'm like, how can I get them more bang for their every note? Like, how can their music get more exposure and a wider audience? And I was like, I guess I need to go with a record label. And everybody knows you don't really need a record label, obviously. I mean, I've released my first 2 without a record label, and it's fine. I mean, I didn't put much money into promoting it or anything, but like they'll be there for forever.
Yeah. In
some digital form. So at least it's out there, and it's anyone who really wants to find it, it's easy to find. So I was looking around. I never really pitched my idea to any record companies either, because, as with most people, why get rejected if you don't have to? So I just did a lot of research, and I was like, you know what? I am essentially working as a label, just under my own name. So I was like, I'll just make it more official. Pick a fictional name and like make it look like a real record label. Yeah, so that was my intention, just to release my own projects and AB Duo's projects.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like, Lanier Salmon's composer who lives in Santa Cruz, he saw that, you know, I was thinking about, or I was, you know, starting a label, and he's like, hey, you know what? I think Post Haste Reed Duo is looking for a label. And I was like, awesome. And then, you know, Post Haste Reed Duo emailed me, and they're like, hey, heard you're starting a label. You know, maybe we can release our debut CD with you. And I'm like, sure, okay. So now I'm releasing other people's music too.
So now you're a mogul.
Yeah, one release.
You get a big cigar and a large desk now.
No.
That comes with it.
I imagine it'd be great to start with an assistant or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I have 3 interns.
Oh, nice.
Oh, wow.
They're very, very part-time. Very, very part-time. It's mainly because I'm actually paying them minimum wage.
Oh.
So, like, I'm like, okay, am I gonna, you know, can I just do this myself, or am I willing to pay minimum wage for this? Okay, I'm willing to pay, and then I'll email them and say, okay, can you do this or whatever.
Nice.
But they've been really helpful.
So what kinds of, what do you envision as the kind of the future of Aerocade? Like what does Aerocade exist to do?
It exists to sort of do cool, like release cool things. I mean, that's sort of like basically do what I've been doing. Just I can do it for other people, and hopefully gain an audience that's just, you know, for like the weird stuff that we release. And I don't think there's really a label that does music like this in California, or at least not in San Francisco.
Hmm.
And,
well, so I guess maybe a better question would have been, since you said you were doing this on your own before, what are you creating by making this new structure under which you release not only your own records but other people's records? What do you gain by creating this new kind of umbrella thing, as opposed to having your individual releases and Post Haste individual releases as separate entities?
Well, we can, like with a lot of things, like when you collaborate on a project, there's like more energy and more, I think it's just easier to do things when there's more than just one person involved. And I imagine a future when, like the you know, smallish audiences of all the independent artists that are, you know, that I will eventually sign to my label, you know, we can share resources, like as far as like contacts and our audiences as well. So like if you buy Pheromone on my new label, when Post Haste's CD comes out, you'll probably hear about it. Whereas before you probably wouldn't have. So, you know, it's just like coming together and like pooling resources in a way. Even though, I mean, it's my record label, but like I'm not Sony Music. I'm not paying people thousands of dollars or millions of dollars to go record their thing. It's really like a step above, you know, releasing it yourself.
Yeah.
For now, anyway.
For now, anyway. Yeah.
Well, I think there is something to be said for, like you said, sharing your audiences among. I mean, there are certainly people who know who Mirne Shim is and are going to buy your albums, but they may not know how much they would dig Post Haste Duo's stuff. And the same, I'm sure there's an audience of people who are definitely going to go look for whatever Post Haste is up to, but may not know what Mirne is up to, and then find you through them. And in that regard, it's almost like a pooled audience, and you're developing kind of a reputation as a group as opposed to an individual that you kind of share. In that regard, it's a little bit like New Amsterdam Records, right? Like, I don't know a lot of the new people that release stuff on New Am, but I know that I would at least be interested in checking out anything that they release because I've listened to other stuff that is on that label that is very interesting to me.
Right. You see the same thing with Parma or Innova, and then in the larger classical world with Naxos and some of those others.
I'd say
Yeah,
it's
but
more
those
like
guys
being
actually, like, they're Naxos is making a bunch of money.
Yeah.
They're
I
big
would say it smaller labels, and I think Mirane, your project is definitely like this. It's more like being a curator than a record producer for people who are interested in stuff that's similar, or they trust your opinion and like, if you're going to release this, then I should check it out, which I'm a big fan of.
Yeah, that's the. Hopefully, that's how it works out.
Yeah.
And maybe make enough money to cover your costs.
Let's not get crazy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but that's my only goal, is to break even.
Yeah.
And make cool things.
Yes.
So if your goal is to break even, are you structured as a nonprofit or are you structured as a for-profit?
Oh no, it's all part of my sole proprietorship.
Oh, okay.
So definitely for profit.
So this is just a part of your own personal sole proprietorship.
My vast empire, yes.
You're killing Sam over there.
Yes.
Oh no.
So this new album comes out November 13th, and funded by, in large part, a lot of Kickstarter backers, and you've got some super cool album artwork, by the way.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then when is this Post Haste album coming out?
Right now it's scheduled for January 29th.
Cool.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Like they're so great. I think they're one of those, like, well, first of all, they're, on the West Coast. They're not in New York, so nobody, like, we're not as cool as the New York people, but they are so good. They're so good, and they play so beautifully, and this record is just amazing. I mean,
good to hear.
yeah, it's just like good. It's just good, solid music and really amazing playing, and yeah, I think I'm hopeful. I'm like, I really want to do a good job of releasing this, because it's if it was my own project, it's like oh well, it didn't do well, who cares? But like now I'm like, oh, I'm responsible for somebody else's future, so.
So do you see that then as a goal for Aerocade, is to kind of build or at least somehow expand the West Coast scene?
I guess that would be a really nice side effect, to the thing, because there's a lot of cool stuff going on in San Francisco and California. I mean, especially LA. There's so much going on there now. And San Francisco, too, there's a lot going on here, but it's still, not the epicenter of the universe like New York is. So just trying to, like, we're here too.
Yeah, I think California suffers from the fact that to do anything you have to drive. Everywhere you go, it's driving.
Yes.
And New York is walking, at least in certain parts of New York.
Mm-hmm.
I've only been to California once, and my experience was, man, oh man, there's lots of driving, and you spend a lot of time in the car.
You are totally correct, unfortunately.
And I know that if you hear the words the 405, you go, oh.
Well, yeah, if you're in LA, for sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, though, it's slightly less distance to cover than if you were in Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I guess so, yeah. There's just, population density isn't as crazy here. I think that's what it is. I know, like, non-New York people like to dog on New York sometimes, but, and there's so much going on there just because there's a lot more people.
Yeah.
Like, if you had squished that many people anywhere, there would be a lot happening.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Critical mass. Exactly.
Well, Mirne, it's been really, really great talking to you this morning. we want to encourage everybody to check out this album and check out everything that you are working on. Where should people go to find out more about Pheromone or about Aerocade?
You can go to my website, mirane.com, or aerocademusic.com, AEROCADE music. Yeah. And on November 1st, I'm playing Shoal Street Studios in Brooklyn. November 7th, I'm playing a solo set at the Knob Festival in Wichita, Kansas.
Sweet.
Man, you're getting around.
I'm getting around.
The Knob Festival in Wichita, Kansas. That is not a plug that we've had on the show in the 5 years that we've been doing the show.
We'll make sure that we...
There is new music going on in Wichita, Kansas. It's not New York, believe it or not.
We have a good friend who teaches there, actually, in Wichita, Jeff Dybel, who is a fan of new music.
He is. There's a lot of fans of new music in every little corner.
That's right.
Of the world, I think. You just have to go find them.
And then when you find them, help them set up a record label, and then you can solve all of the problems. I meant to ask this earlier, Mirane. In setting up this record label, what was that like for the first time setting up a record label? Was there anything in that process that surprised you?
That surprised me. Jeez.
Yeah, like I'm sure there are people who are listening to this now that think, well, if Mirane can start a record label, I can start a record label. What would you tell them?
And I'd say you can definitely start a record label. Do it. The thing that's challenging, I don't know about surprising, but I think that was sort of like overwhelming for me was like learning about all the licensing rights, like copyright and licensing, music licensing, and like sync licensing, and all the law related things that go with music and copyrights. Yeah. Oh, but one thing I want to say is like I want to keep my label like really small. It's definitely not going to be an Innova where anybody with an idea I would just release. Not that I'm sure they do some kind of, I'm sure they listen to everyone's project before saying yes, but yeah, because it's, even though I have 3 very, very part-time interns, it's really just me. So I'm not actively seeking submissions or solicitation for projects. But the few that I have received have all been from white men. I love white men. I'm married to one. But I would really love to hear, even if just so I can say, I rejected 3 women today, for my label or whatever. Like, I would, would rather have to hear from, or people who aren't straight white men all the time.
Yes.
Especially, I'm in San Francisco. Come on, people. Or not in San Francisco, but close by.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have links to where they can find you and bother you with their stuff now that you've said that.
Yes.
Everybody go find Mirane and send her all of your everything recordings.
Thank you.
So, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for getting up early for us out in California in Pacific time. We appreciate it.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me on again, and I apologize for taking up so much of your time over the last 2 years.
No, this is great. Oh. This is great. This is really great music, and we encourage everyone to check it out. Again, this is coming out in just a couple of weeks, November 13th, right?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. So we'll have links to all of that stuff. Thank you so much for being with us. If anybody listening to this, first of all, thank you for being with us for now about 45 minutes. We appreciate your 45 minutes. I know there are a lot of other things you could do with that 45 minutes, like listen to some kick-ass flute and electronics music. So we would encourage you to do that. You can find out more about all of this stuff when I said we'll have links in the show notes. You might be wondering, where are those show notes, David? Those show notes are at soundnotion.tv/SN. You can also find us on Twitter. We're at SoundNotion. I'm Dave McDowell. Ben is B. Furman. Nate is a Nate tree, Sam is Housegoy, and Mirene is, of course, Mirene. So, and if you can spell Mirene, then you deserve to follow her on Twitter. That's MEERENAI. So you should definitely find her and follow her. And thank you so much for watching or listening, and we will see you back next week.
Boom. November 13th is also the date of my composition studio concert, so I think that's a good omen.
It is
Oh,
also
yeah.
Friday the 13th.
It is.
Yeah.
I was very